Thank you for listening to this weekend's message. For more information about events or details here at New Tribe Church, visit us online at newtribe.church. Be sure to also look for us on Facebook and Instagram at New Tribe Church.
What I want to talk about this morning is a very practical message of positioning yourself into the outpouring. And because how we live in relation to God's will for our life, God's plans for our life, it matters. How we live matters to him. And people really want us, and this is kind of like this tug and this pull on us. It's like they want us to pick a side. They want us to either go way over here where it's like, well, you know, I said a prayer once, so once saved, and I'm here, and God is somehow obligated to my initial agreement with him to bless me because I said this thing. And so they want us to go all the way over here and be like, well, it's because grace and I can kind of do whatever I want because he can forgive me again later on. And some of that is true to an extent. And then or they want us to come all the way over here and it's all works and it's all you got to prove it. And if you behave, then God will somehow not be embarrassed in public by you, right? Like you're the bratty kid that oh, this kid again, I can't even. So we just got to behave and be that guy. And in reality, because what happens is our theology can get weird and we can have Paul arguing with James on whether it's faith or whether it's works. But in reality, it's a bit of both because they're speaking to each other. There's this faith works thing happening, and really, I don't think any of us would disagree in the room that your faith in God should change how we live our daily lives, right? That's obvious to us. No one has to convince you of that. So there's this partnering together it's not one or the other, it's actually a little bit of both. Ephesians 4 says this, and I want you to listen to this in the context of today's culture. Context of what we watch on the news, what we see on our social media feeds. It says this, now this I say and testify in the Lord that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles or the outsiders do. And he's talking to Christians here in the futility of their minds. They're darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardness of heart. They become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. But that is not the way you learned Christ. Assuming that you've heard about him and were taught in him as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, okay? Put off your old self, which belongs to the former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed by in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. There's a shedding of one and a putting on of another. And what I want to talk about is really how we position ourselves into the other, into that outpouring that God wants to pour over you. And this is not a legalism message. This is a message of hope. I'm hoping this morning, I hope it's hope this morning, that it's not a message that kind of discourages you, but encourages you that as we kind of lean into our faith in Jesus, he's slowly making us like him. And sometimes we can look at somebody else's story and it's drastic and it's perfect and it's immediate, and we can get discouraged because we're still struggling, but I promise you he's at work. He's at work. And he deals with all of us differently. When I was about 30 years old, I saw this picture of myself from the back, and it was kind of higher up, and there was this spot right here that didn't have so much of the hair, all right? And I remember seeing this picture of myself, and I went to Trin, to my wife, and I was like, do I really look like that? Is my hair that gone there? She's like, well, yeah. And I was like, I didn't know. Because when you're in the mirror looking and you're like sprucing up the tufts that you have left, and you're trying to you kind of see yourself like you used to be, right? There's something about this, how you saw yourself before, that kind of fills in some of the gaps. And I had more gaps than I expected to fill in. And so I shaved my head, and much to my kids' dismay, they were in tears when they saw me. And I wanted to yell back, I'm the one who has no hair. You should be happy for me. So what I discovered was wigs. And because who doesn't have a backpack of wigs, right? Because that's how we're gonna roll this morning. And when someone puts on a wig, it's a good thing, right? Like it's a change of look. When a bald guy puts on a wig, an angel gets its wings. That's not our official theology on angelic behavior. But there's something about it. So I'm going to show you a couple of my favorites. I have many. Because every time we see one, my kids are like, Dad, you have to buy this. It's awesome. I was like, okay. So I have a few. I want to show, and there's a point to it. So if you're like, why are we laughing in church? Relax, it's going to be okay. We're going to get to stuff in a second. I'm trying to make a point. So I have these wigs, and here's some of my favorites. The first one is more a toupee. And it's got a clippy thing that's supposed to go in the hair that you have. But I think I'd have to gouge that into my skin to do it. So what I normally do is I tape it on. And if I'm really feeling it, I will wet it down and do a good comb over, okay? And I'll get it going. And it's amazing because it's super disgusting, right? Like it works. Thank you. I know, I feel good this morning. So that's my toupee. I pull that one out when I'm really feeling like I'm gonna go with that. Because this one is just like, hey, ladies. You know, there's something about this one that's just super creepy. People are taking pictures. I'm gonna give you that one. That's what I'm saying. So that's my toupee, right? We'll lay that right there. I've got this one, which is a good one. This one is the mullet, right? So the thing about most mullets is they say it's business in the front and party in the back, but this one has frosted tips. So it's party in the front and party in the back. So this is the way, like it's multi-generational because it's like late 90s, early 2000s, and the back is more 80s, right? So this one is like, honestly, when I'm doing this one, I go a little Joe Dirt on it, man. Like, it's like, this one's got some stuff going on with it. And so sometimes my voice changes a little bit when I put it on because come on, this is a good one, right? This is a good one. So that's my mullet wig, and that one sheds. I don't like that. But this one's actually my favorite because this is one of those wigs that you kind of question to yourself, does he know how bad that looks? So it's more of a wig where it's a little awkward in public because you kind of look at it and you go, is that real? Is he trying? So it puts kind of a question mark in people's minds. And if I want to take this one all the way, I actually use the teeth as well. And when I do that, I'm gonna take those out. When I do that, it's like, and one of the best things about the wigs is I use this to embarrass my children. Because what better part of parenting is there than embarrassing your kids in front of their friends? But I don't know, and you may not know this about me, okay? But I feel awkward sometimes around certain strangers. Like if I'm doing something funny in public, or I was talking to people on the elevator last night or somewhere, it's just like, that's fine. But if I'm asking for something, you guys are loving this, right? If I'm asking for something, I feel awkward. So when I'm ordering, I don't like to order pizza on the phone. That's super, anybody else not like I don't want to order things on the phone. It's super awkward, so I'm super pumped about the apps. You can just like order and take out all human communication. Because I feel awkward asking for pizza, because they come up with those trick questions like, what would you like to order? And I'm like, why did I call? And heaven forbid, I think I've shared this before, that I have to return an item to a store. And my wife has learned over the years to tell me to walk away. Because if I have to return this shirt, we get to the counter and she's like, I'm returning the shirt. And I'm like, because I like the shirt. It didn't fit right through the shoulders. And I was gonna wear it, but I didn't. And Trina's like, can you leave right now? This person's getting paid $9 an hour. They didn't make the shirt. We're just returning a shirt. And I'm like, I have to go because I'm so sorry I didn't like the shirt. I feel awkward about it. But when I position myself under one of these bad boys, I don't feel awkward because it changes me. I feel it's just funny to me for some reason. So it kind of changes how, I'm gonna take that off, how I interact with people. And so I can do anything and have in public just like to embarrass my kids or be funny when I'm wearing those because it's not me, it's something else I'm under. And when you position yourself into the outpouring of God, you will be changed. There's something about going under something else that isn't you that changes how you feel about yourself, changes how you interact with people, changes how you live. And I believe that, like the verses said, putting off your old, corrupt, former self, putting on your new self, created after the likeness and righteousness of God, once we kind of get under that, there's something about us that's like, I'm not embarrassed anymore. I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm not worried about what people think when I talk about Jesus. Sharing your God story will start to feel natural. Doing dumb stuff or watching or listening to things that promote darkness over light no longer feel right. They're not there. There's something about being under something else that makes you kind of conform to what that thing is. And I'm telling you, we're going to be under something. We're gonna be under something. And so I'm kind of promoting the idea this morning that we kind of find ourselves positionally back under the outpouring of God. He wants to do something unique in us. And let me say this, if there's parts of our lives that aren't completely changed, and that's true for everybody here, then that probably means a couple things. One, that maybe you don't completely believe that God is who he says he is. Okay? I would say for most of us in this room, it probably means that there's parts of our heart that aren't completely bought into the idea that God is on your side and wants what's best for you. That's probably the bigger reason in the room why most of us find ourselves kind of getting back out from under the outpouring of God, because we kind of question his motives. So we kind of back away from it a little bit. But let me just say this, like our belief system doesn't change God or the Bible. It just doesn't. But our belief system will allow him the access to pour over us. That's what, because whether you believe he's good or not, whether you believe he has your best interest at heart, that will make you do the things or not do the things that are necessary to put ourselves back into that outpouring. It will change our position. Like Pastor Jared shared already this morning, I love their story. I love their story because they positionally, like even physically in the space, positionally changed to let the power of God pour over them. And that's how he explains it. He says all he could say is like over his shoulder, it was like water rushing, it's like love rushing over him like water. And I want to say, the water was always there. The water was always there. Positionally, they put themselves under it, so they felt it, right? So God wants to pour over you. He wants to like flow over us. And this kind of made me start thinking about water and water just in our world and access to water and health and all that kind of stuff. So I started doing a little research online and threw this picture up. This first map is like the percentage of population without access to clean drinking water, okay? So this is like the darker the color, the fewer people are without clean drinking water. The brighter the color they are. And so that we look at that map and we're like, that sounds about right, right? That looks right to me. That would be the case, that there's parts of our world that just geographically don't have as much water. Just don't have access to it. So then I started looking at the percentage of a population of a country that is below the national poverty line, and throw that map up there. It's pretty much the same. There's a few differences down here that are probably like governmental corruption and other things, but other than a few smatterings, it's the same. And the access to drinking water, the access to water, the time spent just trying to find water is linked to our health, our wealth, our well-being in this space that we live in. Now, as part of our commitment to help orphans and widows, we as a church, we're doing something about that. I just want to kind of sidebar for a second as we talk about this, but we as a church help support 29 orphanages in 14 different nations through an organization called Streams of Mercy. And I want to share with you this village called Gutamuma And Gutamuma is a village in southern Ethiopia. And for generations, due to its remote location, villagers, mostly kids, mostly girls, would have to walk 1 hour with a bucket, collect water, and then carry that bucket on their heads back for an hour. And this was like daily routine for them. This is just what they had to live with. This is everyday life. That is until Streams of Mercy. And what Streams of Mercy did was they ran a water line through that 1 hour trek to pump water back to this village of Gutamuma and establish not just one, but 3 water stations in the village. And so they don't have to trek 2 hours round trip for water anymore. And this opened up the heart of the village chief who was once opposed to the gospel outreach in that area. Right? Isn't that beautiful? That the access to water all of a sudden opened up the heart of this village to receive the gospel. And that's just in the physical realm. But what I want to say is just because we are in abundance of water here, some of us are living in dry and arid seasons because we have purposefully, or things have been done to us that have made us step out from the water source. And so now we feel barren, we feel dry and cracked, and we're not producing and we're not healthy because we have taken ourselves out from this water source. And God is like, it's still here. It's pouring over here if you'll just come back to me. I just want to ask you, have you let external circumstances make you wander away from God? Now, in Daniel 3, like Pastor Chris was sharing this morning, the Israelites have been conquered again, this time by Babylon. And the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, which a lot of us have heard that name, orders his officials to find the best people from the royal family of the Jews. And anyone who's rich, good-looking, smart, quick to understand, qualified to serve, he has them placed in the king's palace so they can learn Babylonian culture. It's kind of like the Babylonian version of The Bachelor, right? We're going to bring all these people together, and we're going to kind of teach them and figure things out. So Daniel is one of them, as well as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he, of course, changes their names to Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, all 4 young men were given new names signifying new beginnings in their lives for the Babylonians, right? But their names beforehand were awesome. Their names beforehand actually meant that they were consecrated to God. So I want you to hear these names. So Daniel means God is my judge. He changes Daniel's name to Belteshazzar, which means may Bel, or the god Bel of the Babylonians, protect his life. He changes it to this foreign god. Hananiah, which means my God is gracious, becomes Shadrach, which some believe is a reference to the pagan god Marduk, okay? So there's these gods that the Babylonians worship. He's like changing their names to reference them. Mishael, which means who is what God is, becomes Meshach, which is also connected to Marduk. And Azariah, which means Yahweh has helped, becomes Abednego, which means servant of Nebu, which is another god. All 4 names go from honoring God and have some sort of association to the Babylonian deities in some way. But regardless, here's what I want you to hear this. Regardless of what someone else said about them, regardless of how someone else labeled them, regardless of whether things were going well for them, they stayed under the outpouring. Okay? They didn't stray from that. And we continue to see that through the story. In the 2nd year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he's troubled by these dreams. And he can't sleep, so he asks someone to interpret them, and no one can. So he actually makes an order that they would kill all the wise men in Babylon. So Daniel hears about this because he's one of the wise men, and they've come to kill him. And God gives him the interpretation for the dream, and he gives it to the king. And the king is so grateful that he promotes Daniel over all the wise men in Babylon, and Daniel puts Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as administrators over the whole province, okay? And let me stop here, because this is where our theology turns weird, okay? This is where we start trying to tell God how he works. Because what happens is they honor God, they get promoted, and we're like, see, if you just honor God, if you just had more faith, if you just eat the right things, because they were eating the right things, then God will. And I want to say this, if you just theology is behavior-based. If you just theology is us doing something impressive, and again, God isn't looking for kids to impress him. He's impressive on his own. And so we will make weird theology when God blesses, because what we do is, if God is blessing, then obviously I'm doing the right things. And if things aren't going right, then I must be doing some of the wrong things. But it's not that cut and dry. There's an outpouring of sometimes even discipline. There's an outpouring of a father who loves us enough to let us learn some things along the way. And so there's this way we live. And so what they do, so it says this. Hang on, I'll get there in a second. If life starts to go really bad for you, does that mean you're automatically out of the outpouring? Because I don't believe that. Because we live in a world that is truly imperfect. And there are things that God allows because he's doing something that we don't understand. And I think all of the pain and angst that we have is tied to the idea that we want this place to matter so much, as opposed to that we're a vapor just passing through. And we're so earthly tied, dirt-wise, to this place that we have a hard time seeing beyond that. So we come up with if you just theology. And life starts to go bad for them, even though they do all the right things. And I heard a pastor ask this question one time, and it was this: what if faith can't even be found until you have every reason in front of you not to believe? Because faith comes by hearing. Faith is in what is unseen. So what if faith can't even be found until you have every reason in front of you not to believe? And so the king makes this golden image, 9 feet wide, 90 feet tall. It's about 10 stories. Tells the people, every time I play music, you're gonna have to come and bow down. And if you don't bow down, we're gonna throw you into this furnace. And some of the other wise men who don't like the Jews, especially that the Jews got promoted, they purposefully point out that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not bowing to your image. And here's where we're gonna pick up Daniel 3, verse 13. It says, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I've set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Have you ever done the right thing and life still goes sideways? Right? Because it's not like, again, I'm not promoting the idea today that if you'll just get into the outpouring, everything will go swimmingly. I'm not promoting that idea this morning. I'm saying if you'll get into the outpouring, a good father will pour over you what you need. And he's doing something beyond just our little orbit, right? He's doing something beyond that. So King Nebuchadnezzar has been good to them. They've done the right things, but all of a sudden he's furious. He's trying to kill them, but watch what happens. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, it's one of my favorite phrases in the entire Bible, that I believe that God's gonna save us. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you've set up. Just not going there. So we think God's gonna save us. We think God's gonna bless us. We believe that God has something good for us. But even if he chooses another path, I'm good. I'm not bound to you. I'm not bound to something that's not him. They don't flinch. And these guys, they know God's no joke, and they position themselves into his outpouring even when things are going sideways. And when we find ourselves in a bad situation, we normally ask God to put out the fires, don't we? We had our car into the shop this week, and I'm like, dear God, just let it be cheap. Come on, just like, or heal it. Heal that van in that town and country. And like you love all things, even the sparrow. But how much more a town and country? So we want God to take away the problems when we have that. But I heard a pastor named Dan Moeller say this: if you belong to God and a Nebuchadnezzar comes into your life, you don't have a problem, you have Jesus and an answer. You don't have a problem. You have Jesus and an answer. And this is the part of the story most of us know. The king gets so angry, he orders the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, which is almost as hot as this week here in Tennessee, almost. And he gets the strongest soldiers to tie them up and throw them in the furnace. Fire so hot that the soldiers throwing them in the fire died. And all of a sudden, all the people see them walking around in the fire, not tied up. And they say there's a 4th person that looks like the son of the gods. And the king calls them out, and they're not singed, and there's no smoke. And it ends with the king saying this. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants, and they trusted him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own." And I want to end with this. When you put yourself into the outpouring of God, when you decide, regardless of circumstances, regardless of whether things are a blessing season or it feels like a cursing season, it rains on both, right? Bible's pretty clear. So regardless of where you find yourselves, how do we position ourselves back into that outpouring? Because I'm telling you, if you will, the atmosphere around you will change. People will take notice. They will know that no problem is too big for God. They'll know that no person is too intimidating, that you don't have to cave in when people come at you, because it's not about the fire, it's about who God is. It's not about what's blazing against you right now. It's about who God is. And if you'll bow your heads, we're gonna sing that chorus one more time. There's another fire. Just bow your heads for a moment with me. Some of you find yourselves in a situation right now where it feels like all hell is breaking loose against you. Whether that's in your finances, whether that's in attacks from other people, whether that's in relationships that you thought were solid and you found out weren't. But I want to encourage you this morning that there's another one in the fire with you right now. That you are not alone this morning. You're not without help. God's not angry at you. He's not a father like we understand fathers. He's not vindictive. He's inviting you back into his outpouring. But there's a trust that takes place in that process, that we believe that even though things don't look good today, there's another one in